Kenya goes on the offensive after another deadly attack by al-Shabaab. We'll have a live update from Nairobi. Suspense in Ferguson as the Missouri town waits for the grand jury to make a decision in the shooting of Michael Brown. Destination America. Why the U.S. is the education nation for international students. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Tonight, Kenyans continue grieving for their relatives killed in cold blood over the weekend by suspected Islamist militants. The attack Saturday on a bus in the northeast of the country left 28 people dead and several others injured. Some residents now fear another terrorist attack. The grief is unbearable for many of the relatives of the 28 victims of the weekend attack. Many have to endure the pain of identifying their dead loved ones and taking their remains for burial. It has been reported that there were 60 people on the hijacked bus bound from Mandera County to Nairobi, the country's capital, when a group of armed gunmen hijacked the bus, divided passengers by faith, and killed 28 of them with a gunshot to the head. Several others were injured. Why? Residents ask. The government has pledged to strengthen security after the attack on Saturday. However, many in northeastern Kenya and elsewhere in the country say they live in fear of another terrorist attack. Police say they are confident the army has dealt with the attackers.
The military really gave us a lot of aerial support and aerial coverage, and of course they have a lot of capacity to pursue, so they pursued them. And we hear that what I hear is that military action was appropriately taken.
So far, there is no evidence that the attackers have been eliminated. Residents of Umari Jilao, a small town on the outskirts of Mandera, say they heard the shots on Saturday morning. They say al-Shabaab has attacked their town before and they fear more attacks will come.
Day and night, we don't sleep. We keep watch. The problem is from Somalia.
Mandera's minority Christian population Sunday's church service was like no other before it. Many fear they are now targets.
Been here for I think 4 years, and everything has been quite okay because since the time I came here for 4 years.
Kenyan security forces claim they have pursued and killed more than 100 militants and destroyed their camp in Somalia after the ambush of a Nairobi-bound bus. In Nigeria, more than 25 people, mostly fishermen, were shot dead in a remote community in the northeastern Borno state. Police and witnesses said suspected Boko Haram insurgents on motorcycles entered Dorombega, north of Maiduguri, on Saturday and started firing at the fishermen. The attack was not immediately reported due to poor communications. Wednesday, 45 people were killed in the same state as reprisals for the killings of 4 Boko Haram members. While Tunisians went to the polls on Sunday to choose a president in an election marking the first directly elected president since the Arab Spring Revolution that led to the president being kicked out of office. Well, Sunday's vote marks the long-awaited completion of a transition to democracy after Tunisians sparked protests in the middle east of the country by overthrowing dictator Zain El Abidine Ben Ali 3 years ago. Among the more than 24 candidates, 87-year-old Beji Saidi Essebsi, a political veteran, has emerged as the frontrunner, followed by current President Moncef Monzoki. A runoff will be held in December if no one secures an absolute majority. Well, the United Nations Mission for Ebola Emergency Response is establishing an office in Mali. Officials say the UN office will raise Mali's level of preparedness and improve cross-border coordination between Mali and Guinea. The World Health Organization says the death toll in the Ebola epidemic has risen, and recently, out of more than 4,500,000 reported cases. Well, we want to know, here in the United States rather, efforts are underway to improve the protective gear worn by medical and support staff working with Ebola patients. VOA's Amy Katz reports a team from Johns Hopkins University is responding to the call with a creative twist.
The Ebola virus is transmitted through contact with an infected person's bodily fluids. In order to protect themselves, healthcare workers must wear special suits that completely isolate them from the virus. But in some cases, says Rich Lamport, vice president of the global health organization JPIGO, the suit is part of the problem.
We found to be at much higher risk than they need to be, primarily because the process of taking it off puts the healthcare worker at risk.
Lamport says the current suit requires about 20 steps to be removed safely, which creates opportunity for human error. And West Africa's hot, humid climate makes it uncomfortable for health workers to spend more than 40 minutes inside the airtight suit. So the call went out from JPIGO and Johns Hopkins University for a better, safer, more comfortable design. More than 70 people took part in the Ebola Design Challenge. Students, health professionals, even a wedding gown designer.
The wedding gown and the Ebola suit have a lot more in common than one would think. They're both multi-layered garments that require a lot of diligence to remove. Being a person that is a pattern maker and also knowing how garments are made and constructed, I knew that I could contribute to.
That's the idea behind the challenge, says Yusuf Yazdi, executive director of the Johns Hopkins Bioengineering Innovation Center.
To solve a problem, you need all the different perspectives at the table. If we just addressed it from an engineering or technical perspective, the design would be a failure.
The Hopkins team entered a design based on ideas from the challenge in a separate Ebola suit competition sponsored by the U.S. government. It was recently chosen as a semi-finalist. One of their improvements was to the headset, which currently requires goggles and 2 surgical masks. Team member Tim Campbell is a researcher at the Hopkins Hospital.
We wanted to minimize the amount of face touching that went on in the removal or doffing process. So we switched to this version of the head covering system. We've installed vents in the sides of the mask. This is just a prototype, but right here.
Bioengineering student Erin Reesfield is excited to be on the volunteer team.
Our program has a global health aspect to it already, and so a lot of us are very passionate about helping out the developing world.
The Hopkins team's goal is ambitious, to create a new, low-cost Ebola suit in a matter of months, not years. For producer June So, Amy Katz, VOA News.
Well, we started off with the weekend attacks in Kenya. Now, for some perspective, we are joined via phone from Nairobi by Mustafa Yusuf Ali, Secretary General, Global Network of Religions for Children. Well, until 2013, Mr. Yusuf Ali served as the Secretary General of the African Council of Religions, Religious Leaders and African Representative of Religions for Peace International. Welcome to Africa 54, Mr. Yusuf Ali.
Thank you, David.
Now, it looks like things are getting worse in Kenya as far as security is concerned. What's your assessment?
Yeah, that is a correct assessment. The weekend attacks by Al-Shabaab and the recent killings of police in various parts of the country, targeting of Christians in a number of locations in the country, and Mombasa riots is a big cause for concern, and it looks like things are getting out of hand.
Now, there are people who are concerned that this kind of attacks might lead to a kind of tension between Christians and Muslims. Do you have the same fears yourself?
It's not that it might lead. Already there is tension between Muslims and Christians, and that the religious leaders and communities are working hard to explain what is going on. It's a group of terrorists that are yearning to have an interreligious conflict in Kenya. So there is tension, but that the people are being made to understand, Kenyans are being made to understand that it is precisely what groups like Al-Shabaab would like to see the situation in which Christians and Muslims are fighting each other. There is tension, yes, but that is being contained at the moment.
Now, there's some who are critical of the government's approach. What's the best way to deal with the security situation without appearing to be kind of being so hard on one group of people?
Yeah, many of those who have spoken, including the Muslim religious leaders, have said that the way the government approached the challenges of security in Mombasa is what has caused a lot of security challenges in itself in the country. The closure of mosques has made the young people to think that the government is harassing Muslims countrywide. Now, this is what, unfortunately, Al-Shabaab has taken up, and in its message after the Mandera attack has said that they are retaliating for the closure of the mosques and the targeting of Muslims by the government in Mombasa. Of course, the government has the responsibility to protect Kenyans, and this is why they went into Mombasa, into those mosques, and allegedly retrieved grenades and an assortment of weapons. But the Muslim leaders are saying, look here, you should have involved the Muslim leaders, the local Muslim leaders, so that those who are responsible for storing these arms in the mosque are actually held to account, and that those arms are taken out of the mosque.
Thank you very much. Mr. Yusuf Ali. Thank you very much. And Mr. Yusuf Ali is the Secretary General Global Network of Religions for Children and Director at Igato International in Nairobi, Kenya. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, Ferguson on the edge. The U.S. watches and waits as a grand jury debates the case of a white police officer accused of shooting a black teen. Stay with us.
Ebola is not a curse or spiritual infection. It is a deadly disease, a fever spread by contact with the body fluids of infected people. I am Dr. Kande Greaves. Its symptoms start with a fever, fatigue, and muscle pain. Within a few days, vomiting and diarrhea sets in, and victims lose about 4 liters of body fluid each day. Ebola is highly infectious. If you experience any of these symptoms, seek medical help immediately. You must wash your hands regularly. Do not eat or handle bushmeat. Stay away from people suffering from Ebola. And do not handle the bodies of Ebola victims. If you have had contact with someone who has Ebola, you need to have your temperature monitored daily for any change. Early diagnosis and treatment is critical to your survival. Learn the facts about Ebola. Knowledge is life.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory. U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel is stepping down. The New York Times, citing senior administration officials, says the resignation comes under pressure amid several foreign policy crises, including the ongoing battle against Islamic State militants. Now, the defense chief submitted his resignation letter to President Obama early Monday. Secretary is expected to remain in the position until a successor is confirmed. While tension is high in Ferguson, Missouri, as a grand jury weighs whether to indict a white police officer in the August killing of a black teenager. While a majority of local protesters in Ferguson have been training for non-violent protests, some members of far-right and far-left groups are stirring things up. VOA's Ayesha Tanzim reports from Ferguson.
Images on news media of protesters and police clashing, as well as interactions on Twitter, Facebook and other social media, make it look like protesters in Ferguson are clashing daily with law enforcement. In reality, demonstrations in this area have been mostly peaceful since the shooting sparked violent protests in August. Some local protesters have been attending classes in non-violent action, and leaders have asked their groups to call out any demonstrators they see causing trouble. Some groups, however, like RBG Black Rebels, are inflaming matters. crimes. This self-described urban militia has offered a reward on Twitter for the location of Darren Wilson, the white police officer who shot unarmed black teenager Michael Brown. At the other end of the spectrum, the white supremacist group the Ku Klux Klan has been distributing flyers warning protesters that they have awakened a sleeping giant. Some conservative websites have published stories claiming that some protest groups have issued a list of so-called targets. One of the Facebook pages named for publishing the list was Justice for Mike Brown. Dirk Brown, who administers the page, told VOA he never posted it.
I saw the list, but everything they're saying on the list about what I said on the page, I never mentioned it on my page, not one time.
Social media content and violent images in the news from August have put the community on edge, so much so that the governor of Missouri has declared a state of emergency.
Well, we're certainly concerned about folks that are not coming to speak, but instead are coming to instigate or cause harm to their fellow citizen or to the property.
Some business owners in Ferguson are boarding up their storefronts, which might be considered another sign of nervousness about what is to come. Business owners tell VOA that they are not doing it because they feel threatened, but because their insurance companies have insisted on it. Aisha Tanzim, VOA News, Ferguson.
Here in Washington, President Obama is defending his executive order shielding millions of undocumented immigrants from deportation. Republican lawmakers decry the move, but have yet to specify what, if anything, they plan to do. VOA's Michael Bowman reports.
3 days after a landmark announcement that will help define his presidency,
we'll take steps to deal responsibly with the millions of undocumented immigrants who already live in our country.
President Obama appeared on U.S. television sounding resolute about the necessity of last week's executive order in the face of congressional inaction on immigration reform.
Everybody knows, including Republicans, that we're not going to deport 11 million people.
Republican lawmakers like Senator Ted Cruz are united in their opposition to Mr. Obama's action that bypasses Congress.
He is defying the Constitution. He is defying federal law. And he's defying the American people.
Cruz says the Senate should confirm no Obama nominees once Republicans take control of both houses of Congress in January.
George Albert Kroll of New Jersey to be ambassador to the Republic of Kazakhstan.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed.
But Republicans have yet to rally around any single course of action and did not even mention immigration in their response to Mr. Obama's weekly address Saturday, focusing on economic issues instead.
Republicans, we are the party of jobs.
Some Republicans have already ruled out a powerful weapon at Congress's disposal, shutting down the federal government in protest. Senator John Cornyn.
And it's just not going to happen. It shouldn't happen. And it won't happen.
Meanwhile, President Obama is sticking to his position that if lawmakers oppose his executive order on immigration, there is a simple solution.
Pass a bill. Ultimately, Congress has a responsibility to deal with these issues. And there are some things that I can't do on my own.
While Mr. Obama faces a Republican backlash for acting on his own, he is also being criticized by some undocumented immigrants not covered by his order who still face the threat of deportation. But he is getting some cheers from abroad. Mexicans account for more undocumented immigrants in the United States than any other nationality. And Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto applauded Mr. Obama's move.
Those who will benefit are migrants of Mexican origin who have been living in the United States for years. I think when we're talking about justice, this is an act of deserved justice, which values the great contributions of millions of Mexicans to the development of our neighboring country in North America.
Although millions of undocumented immigrants could take advantage of the executive order, it remains to be seen how many will actually come forward and comply with the terms set forth for a temporary reprieve from the threat of deportation. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
Well, still to come on Africa 54, going to college in the U.S. Why do more and more international students come to America? But first, here's a recap of Monday's headlines.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Tunisia, polls close in the first free election to directly elect a new president. Over 64% of registered voters participated. In Kenya, the military kills over 100 Al-Shabaab militants suspected to be linked to a deadly attack on a Kenya bus that left 28 people dead. In Madagascar, an outbreak of plague has killed 40 and infected at least 80 in the capital city of Antananarivo. In South Africa, a judge asked to dismiss the case against Shren Duwani. He's accused of killing his wife on a honeymoon in Cape Town. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. She may be 100 years old, but she loved the smell of salt water. Ruby Holt got her wish as she visited a beach for the first time in her life, thanks to a partnership between the Assisted Living Center, where Holt lives, and Wish of a Lifetime, an organization that grants wishes to the elderly. Holt got an all-expenses-paid trip to the Gulf of Mexico. Holt said her farming family was never able to afford a trip to the coast, and she's only left her home state of Tennessee once before. Holt turns 100 December 11th, 101 actually, December 11th. Now next up, the iconic piano from the Oscar-winning film Casablanca will be auctioned off in New York. Yes. Yes, this time time goes by, but people's love of the movie goes on. Sam's piano is expected to sell for at least $1 million. Casablanca took home 3 Oscars in some year back. More items from the film are up for sale. That is including the doors of Rick's Cafe, final draft of the screenplay, signed cast photos, and passports created for the characters in that film. Well, and in other auction news, what's the big deal about this painting? Well, certainly not the art, but let us tell you about the signature. It's one of some 2,000 painted by Adolf Hitler almost 2 decades before rising to power as the Nazi dictator. This is a watercolor of Munich's old city hall. The work comes with the original bill of sale and a signed letter from the brother of Hitler's private secretary. Now the work was purchased for how much? For $161,000 by a private buyer from the Middle East. And that's what's trending today. Well, close to 900,000 international students are studying at American universities and colleges, more than ever before. About half of them come from Asia, mostly China. The United States hosts more foreign students than any other country in the world, and its population is steadily growing. Zlatsa Hoke reports on this trend.
A new report from the Institute of International Education says that in the academic year 2013-2014, more than 886,000 foreign students enrolled in U.S. higher education institutions, an increase of 8% over the year before. There are now twice as many international students in the U.S. than only a decade ago. That trend is driven to a large extent by incoming undergraduate students from China.
In the U.S., they emphasize on class discussion and emphasize on your opinion. You can actually debate with others and with your professor or teacher. And it's another atmosphere I want to experience.
While the enrollment of Chinese students continues to grow, the past academic year saw a significant increase in students from Kuwait, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and even Iran. More than 4% of the students in U.S. higher education institutions are foreigners. Educators say the presence of foreign students in American schools is beneficial, and that about 4,000 U.S. colleges and universities can accommodate more.
We know that international students contribute significantly to U.S. classrooms and campuses through their global perspectives and by providing international exposure to those American students who may never have the opportunity to study overseas.
Enrollment of students from abroad also adds to the U.S. economy.
This year, $27 billion was contributed to our economy at the local, state, and national levels through payments for tuition, housing, and other costs.
The U.S. State Department and the Department of Education also promote study abroad for U.S. students.
We believe that study abroad can increase American competitiveness by enabling U.S. students to acquire language skills as well as the regional and global perspectives necessary to succeed in the 21st century.
About 290,000 U.S. students went to study overseas in 2012-2013 for academic credit. Europe, especially Britain, remains the #1 destination for American students, but the latest Open Door report shows that more students now choose to go to Latin American countries and China.
China now is at the #5 host country for U.S. students, hosting over 14,000 American students.
While U.S. schools continue to attract young people from all over the world, student exchanges among other countries also are on the rise. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, in time now for sports. Sunny Young is off this week. Well, on Saturday, young and old gathered at the Union Building in Pretoria, South Africa for the Unite for Mandela Sports and Cultural Day activities in celebration of the life of the African leader. The 67-kilometer cycling event was won by Reinhard Janse van Rensburg. The female winner was South African Ashley Passio, also taking part former Tour de France champion Chris Froome. Well, and
it's a great feeling. I mean, today's a special day. I think we can all come together today and ride for a good cause and remember the man himself who recommended that sport was a great way to unite people, and obviously for youngsters promotes a good lifestyle for youngsters.
And that's it. Good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords, where we teach you about words in the news.
This word is from a story about the U.S. government gathering telephone and internet records.
The basic questions are these. Is the surveillance relevant to a terrorist investigation? And does the government monitor actual conversations and emails, or just look at who's involved?
Investigation means to examine something closely and carefully. In this story, the government is directing the investigation to find terrorists.
Police, as well as scientists and other people, carry out investigations to learn about events and how they happen. So, the next time you hear the word investigation,
you will understand what it means.